Join us by the fireside for our evening stories of true life strange encounters with mysterious visitors from worlds and other realities deep within our own universe and beyond. The giant UFO. This is going to be a long story and kind of hard to explain. Anyway, just so everybody knows, I'm not even sure if I was abducted, but my friend seems to be pretty certain that I was. So I was about 15 at the time, and every night, a guy that I'll call Jay and I would sneak out at about midnight and go back home around 4 to 5 in the morning before our parents would wake up for work. On one particular night, we had just snuck out, and it was about 1 a.m. We headed to my backyard, laid on the trampoline, and stared at the stars and talked, like we always did. Now, if you're in a room right now, you'll notice that there are definite four corners where your walls and ceiling meet, and you can see how square they turn. Edge of the wall, sharp turn, second wall, same with your ceiling. You can see each individual flat surface. Now, the sky did that. It went from staring at the stars to looking like a cube of sky. From the southeast corner of the sky, then came this giant UFO, and I mean it was huge. It's as if it took up one quarter of the entire sky, and we both stared at it, and we were dead silent. It didn't seem to make any sound, even as it moved, and while it spun, it was only hovering straight. The spinning didn't move it like you imagine a frisbee doing. The sides just turned while it moved. I guess what it looked like doesn't really matter, but Jay and I had our eyes dead set on it. We didn't say a word. We didn't point to show the other person. As it began coming towards us, we both just flipped over. Again, there were no hints, no talking, no eye contact. It was in total sync. We flipped onto our stomachs and stayed as flat and quiet as we could. Now, ducking from something sounds totally normal and instinct, but that's not what this was. It was literally almost like a kind of telepathy. I can remember us having a mental conversation of stay flat and it won't see us. Don't move. We watch it make a weird angled C shape across the sky, and although it felt totally in slow motion, it could have only been a few minutes because I think both of us held our breath the entire time. Now, for the weirdest part, as soon as it was out of sight, boom, daybreak. We had literally just gotten to the yard, and I know it was 1:15 a.m. because I checked. But the minute we felt released from laying flat, it was very bright, like 7:30, 8 a.m. bright. I don't remember talking to him at all afterwards, other than making eye contact and then making a break for our homes before our parents noticed that we weren't there. A few weeks, even months maybe, I'm talking to my brother's girlfriend about what happened. Apparently, she's really into this stuff, but also completely terrified. She said the fact that it felt like a few minutes, but then it was suddenly 6, 7 hours later, truly, 100% makes her think we were abducted. She was serious. I made a joke about how I should go to hypnotherapy to unblock the memories, and she just says, don't. People who are abducted are traumatized by what happened to them. They even get PTSD. The next day, she texted me about how she couldn't sleep. I think abduction is a little bit of a stretch, but I don't know. And she watched too many Discovery Channel documentaries, but the weird loss of time still irks me. I do know what we saw was 100% real. I don't know what it was, whether it was actual aliens or abduction of some kind. I just don't know. Well, whatever it does sound that there was some kind of time warp kind of thing or something. Either you were abducted there was just some kind of weird, you know, I don't know. Time warp or something like that. An unexpected encounter. My dad would tell me this story over and over again with such a strange look on his face, and I never knew if it was a myth. But when I asked my grandmother about it, she remembers it clear as day as well. My grandmother was just known as Mother back then, and having three children, one being my future father. They were living out in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, lost in the trees and just living peacefully. Preparing for a weekend without the kids, her husband, my grandfather, was dropping the kids off with family. When he returned, the house was dark. That creepy dark where everything feels eerie and you sort of just feel alone. They had a fine evening despite his ill minded thoughts, and they didn't have any problems falling asleep. They didn't have any trouble waking up either, as they were woken up by bright flashes through the tiny solo window in their room. They quickly made their way to the kitchen, where they opened the back door to see what was causing the bright light. My grandfather, wanting to be brave, told his wife to step back, and as he opened the back door, more of those bright colors appeared, and an array of colors neatly set in a weird shaped circle, floating just right above the ground. As his eyes adjusted to the oddly inhumanly bright colors flashing abruptly, he noticed they were coming from some sort of misshaped aircraft, almost shaped like a football or something, just a little more round, but still resembling the bare shape of a deformed football. He couldn't tell what color, nonetheless, less material it was made out of due to the bright flashing colors coming from the odd aircraft. It was just small enough to fit in between the patch of trees, but large enough a family could easily fit inside. Suddenly, he noticed something walking towards him. It was on two legs with 2 feet, just like a person, though it seemed to be naked. It didn't seem to have genitalia from what he saw, but everything else was very human like. The head was kind of elongated, the eyes were large and bulged, but could pass probably for a deformed human. The creature walked up to him and brought his hand out like a wave, but instead of moving back and forth, making a wave motion, his hand was still, as if waiting for a high five or something. Not knowing what to do, my grandfather stood still until he noticed my grandmother had joined him outside and was witnessing this as well. Seeing her face made him realize they weren't dreaming. Once the strange human like creature put his hand down, another one of their kind appeared, walking out onto the same platform his accomplice was standing on, protruding out of the aircraft. He was holding what seemed to be some sort of flat substance. The original creature took it and began offering it to my grandparents. And then, nervously, my grandfather reached out for it, but the creature retracted and reached out to my grandmother instead. She looked at her husband, wary if she should accept their mystery gift, but she finally did. It seemed to be kind of squishy and round, like a pancake, but larger. The creatures brought out another of these pancake substance type things for themselves, and they began eating it. They looked at my grandparents, waiting for them to eat as well. Without thinking, they each tore a piece off and ate it, realizing it must have been made of some type of wheat or grain, but not one that they've seen here on Earth. A different, odd kind of grain from wherever the hell these creatures were from. After they saw my grandparents try their pancake, they wave and they retreat into their aircraft. The platform disappeared with them, and the flashing colors started to fade into the sky. I always ask them, what did they do with the pancakes? Did they give it to the government? Report it all? Both my dad and grandmother said back then that it would have been hard to report something without everyone thinking they were crazy. I never got to meet my grandfather to get his side of the story, but I have this weird gut feeling that they weren't telling a lie. This was not a myth. This was real. That's a really nice story, and yeah, quite heartwarming, really. And I certainly hope this was real. because it's really nice. The weird energy. So, this is the part where I started noticing something that I have never felt before in my life. Going back and forth from inside to outside, I noticed that every time I went outside, I got this very eerie feeling. It's a feeling you get when you hear a noise late at night and you're by yourself. The feeling you get walking down a dark street and you sense that someone is behind you or something is watching you. It's that kind of feeling that you get when you're terrified. I would turn my head and listen because usually when I get that gut feeling that something isn't right, something is not right. This sent chills down my spine so much that I could feel my hair on the top of my head stand up. I just sort of blew this off because maybe I was just overreacting, thinking too much about it, or something. I've always been spiritual in nature, but never really searched for the answers. I've always felt how energy is a constant and doesn't die. I felt this weird energy around me, so to speak, that I have never felt before, and this scared me. So, anyway, I proceeded to move on with my night. The hot tub was finally done heating up, and I was starting to feel cold. But anyway, I proceeded to just get on with my night. The hot tub was finally done heating, and I was starting to feel cold. I grabbed a bottle of water and a cigarette, along with my towel and the remote. I sat these items next to me on the chair next to the hot tub. Once I got in, I sparked my cigarette and I looked up into the sky. It was a clear, cold, crisp night. I could hear police sirens in the distance, and I was thinking to myself, what a world we live in. The next thing I remember is this noise. I was just about done with my cigarette when I felt this pulsing, humming noise all over my body. It was like bass from a song, but more metallic in nature. It was kind of a thumping, but humming too, and you could feel it in your bones. I looked around frantically to see where it was coming from, but it felt like it was kind of everywhere. Once again, I felt that utter fear and a chill down my spine, and my eyes locked onto what I believe was a being from another world. About 100 yards away, and maybe 100 yards in the air across the lake, on the tree line was a dull shroud of light. Slightly orange, but it seemed to have every color as well. It wasn't really a color I've seen more, or just light itself. I became frozen in place and I could not move or make a sound. My vision then immediately started to tunnel, and all I could see was this craft kind of thing hovering above the trees, just chilling there. To best describe what it looked like, I would say if you look at a light from a distance and take the source of that light away, but keep the light around it, is what it looked like. I don't know. I'm probably not explaining that very well, but that's kind of what it was. It was just a shroud of light with no source. I noticed my awareness of things around me was heightened as well, like I was in a higher state of consciousness. I remember saying, "It's within the light," while staring at whatever it was. I have never said that before in my life. It just popped into my head, and I said it aloud as well. After that, I broke out of the tunnel vision and I started thinking, this is not real. I'm seeing things and all that crap. I couldn't believe it. I turned around to face the opposite side of where this thing was and turned back around, and it was still there. The next thing I remember, there was a gust of wind, which somehow opened and then closed the iron gates that I have on each side of my house at the exact same time. It rattled the whole fence along my backyard. I was so scared, but I could not move. I'm not entirely sure what happened next because it's all in fragments. But after the gates, I remember kind of waking back up or something, like coming out of it still in the hot tub. But as soon as that happened, the hot tub started draining water like gallons a second, and the remote was on the chair next to me. At this point, I was done. I ran inside as fast as I could. I was shaking. I was really terrified. I get back inside and I grabbed my phone. I could barely hold it still, but I looked at the clock and I had lost roughly 45 minutes of time when I had been in the hot tub for only about 5 to 10 minutes when the event started. It all happened so fast that I didn't know what really happened until I sat down and said, "What the hell?" I'm not sure what I witnessed that night, but I will say whatever it was had an effect on my perception of time and consciousness. I could feel things I have never felt and saw things I have never seen. I hope one day we figure out what we should know about this world because after this experience, I will say that this world is not just on the physical plane. This changed my perception of things. I just know now there is more to the universe as a whole than we think and know. Wow, that's a truly amazing experience. And also the fact that you experienced this heightened state of consciousness, then opened your inner vision, your spiritual eye, and your hearing, everything just became heightened. That's pretty amazing. And these experiences do change people. People who experience things that are out of the ordinary like this, they're just not the same again. Something switches inside and it makes us wonder, what reality is really all about. Is there more? You know, it's got to be more.